Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs Podcast, where innovation meets sustainability. Building a better tomorrow today. We interview changemakers and visionary leaders redefining success for the planet. Here you'll find inspiring stories and solutions that matter. Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs.
Well, Timothy, hi.
Hey there, Mr. Phil. Nice to see you. Nice to virtually meet you.
Yeah. So are you in Asheville?
Yeah, I'm just outside Asheville.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can help me build rescue rail there.
You know, I've been curious how I might be able to utilize some of these contacts like yourself. You've actually come to mind too, thinking if we had resources like that already in place, what situations could be different. But yeah, definitely interested to.
Well, it can be used right now to just haul garbage,
Okay.
just to haul debris. Set aside the fact that we can solve traffic problems. Let's just make 100 meters that just moves the stuff from out so that it's easier to get it out to a road.
Yeah.
Out to a central place so that we can reduce the amount of trucks because they can just consolidate up efforts.
Yeah.
So how did you get in this whole business?
Well, I mean, I definitely have. There's probably been a lot of external stimuli feeding into my life, feeling like the environment, different social, just the different issues that seem to be important to change, help make a better world. So that's why I have this company and brand, New Earth Entrepreneurs, focused around businesses that are trying to help make the world a better place in whatever way. If it's sustainability, it could be health and wellness. There's a lot of different areas that need up leveling. So it's feels mission oriented in how I got involved.
Okay. All right. So almost all the root causes of the defects in those areas are federal central planning of highways. Oddly enough, we got fat because we don't walk anymore. That makes our health problems go up. We get in a car to go across the street because it's too dangerous to walk across the streets between Best Buy and Lowe's. It's just, and the odd thing is that the framers understood this when they wrote the Constitution. So on September 14, 1787, in the Federal Convention, Dr. Franklin proposed that the federal government add to the Post Roads Restriction in Article 1, Section 8, that the federal government be allowed to build highways and canals. Then George Mason reminded them, and Rufus King, the Boston Tea Party was a demonstration against the general government's transportation monopoly that triggered a war. And so they voted 8 states to 3 that states should be sovereign over internal improvements so we don't mix war powers of the federal government with commercial self-interests. And there's 21 presidential veto messages enforcing that until the Federal Aid to Highways Act of 1916. And that's when 1916 with highways, 1918 with communications, 1936 with energy, and the federal government monopolized all 3 of those industries, resulting in a century of rotary telephones, a century of 25 mile per gallon Model T. The renewable industries had made 800,000 windmills, and that whole industry was wiped out in 1936 and is only now recovering. Kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So war powers should not be mixed with commercial interests is the essential aspect of this. And if we didn't do that, then our cities would still be walkable and bikeable. And there's a good summary from the Bragdon Committee to Eisenhower in 1957 to 59. They knew the Federal Aid to Highways Act of 1956, the interstates, was a mistake even then, but it was too popular and they couldn't pull it back. And for races outcomes, basically highway construction replaced Jim Crow in crushing small or low-income neighborhoods by building highways through it to support rich suburbs. We really just screwed it up.
We'll be definitely interested to hear about what some of how you're working JPods and your kind of solutions towards alleviating some of this. And maybe to kick things off, if you want to, if you kind of just for anybody listening, maybe just give kind of a high level overview of your background, how you moved from military logistics and software development to founding JPods.
Okay. All right. So yes, 1998. I was talking to some of my West Point classmates that studied nuclear engineering together, and I had been in the infantry, and we looked at it and said, we've been fighting oil wars since 1991 and done nothing to get off foreign oil. And we're currently importing 1/3 of the oil we use every day. So when people think that America is oil independent, that is just political nonsense. We're importing 1/3 of our oil. 10 of the last 10 presidents warned that foreign oil addiction is a direct threat to national security. And oil wars since 1990 or since 2000 have cost us $8 trillion. So there's a good example of, had we put that tax on gasoline for the oil wars, we would have already adapted. But the federal government borrowed against the future labor of children and just stacked it up in the national debt instead of charging the taxpayers for the cost of those wars. Okay. So anyway, when I was a little kid, too short to use a wheelbarrow, I used to clean a barn with a half barrel hanging from a guideway. And a kid too short to use a wheelbarrow could move tons of shit. And we just added robots. So everything that Tesla and Waymo are trying to do on the streets have been done with grade separated networks since 1972. So are you familiar with the Morgantown PRT at all? Would you like me to show you a couple of short videos?
If you want to now or afters for the recording, I don't know if I can.
Yeah, you can access them on the recording and then put them in when you like. The Morgantown PRT was so important, President Nixon sent his daughter Tricia to open it in 1972. It is the first network of grade-separated self-driving cars. It's been running since 1972. It has delivered 150 million injury-free passenger miles. In that same period of time, highways killed 1.8 million Americans. So a third of the Holocaust versus no injuries. That's how unbelievably unsafe and foolish we are in moving 2 tons to move a person on highways. 1975, the congressional study, Automated Guideway Transit, laid out that these personal rapid transit or automated guideway networks were the solution to the 73 oil embargo and the hardships and urban traffic problems at that time. But they also noted that government institutional failures had blocked such innovations for 4 to 6 decades, and that was 45 years ago. So it is, all right, so I'm like a squirrel that got stuck in a pipe, can't get out and can't turn around. Once you start working on this problem, you look at it and you go, freight railroads, the 140,000 miles of them, operate at 470 ton miles per gallon. So if we can move a ton at 400 miles per gallon, why are we moving a person at 25? That is 188 times less efficient than we know. So back to the squirrel in the pipe. Once you realize that we can be 10 to 20 to 50 times more efficient, you can't get out of that tunnel. You sit there and say, what are we doing wrong that blocks it? And everything that's blocking it is that, okay, it's a civics lesson. It's not about technology. The technology's existed since 1972. Just like there's the technology for the internet. Great quote from Nikola Tesla in 1926. He says, to me, sunshine and electricity look a lot the same. They're both, I'm sorry, that's Edison, 1910. Edison, 1910, he says, to me, sunshine and electricity look a lot the same. They're both spread out really thin. And what I had to do with electricity was gather it all up and hold it long enough to light a bunch of little lights. He says, do we use sun and wind? He says, oh no, we burn wood and coal like renters burn the front fence. We live like squatters, not like we own the property. And someday somebody's going to invent a way to gather all the energy we need from natural sources and store it in unlimited quantities in our local communities, and electricity will be as cheap as oxygen. And that's exactly what we're doing, okay? So you use the distributed nature of the transportation network to deploy distributed solar energy collectors, and now you're gathering enough energy off the transportation system to power it. And then back to the internet's technology existed. Tesla, 1926, Collier magazine interview. He says, when the network is fully built out, the world will be one gigantic brain and you'll walk around with a television in your vest pocket. He was wrong about vests, okay? You realize the first video conference call was 1927. And then there was nothing until after, 2007 is when iPhones got released. So that's how long it took to go on, because there were government monopolies until 1982, and then it was a 10-year demonopolizing AT&T, and then it took a while longer for the internet to deploy. Okay, so the technology is all here. The problem is that we create governments for the very important purpose of minimizing violence from war and crime by coercing compliance with law. Does that make sense?
Run it back to me one more time and make sure I get it fully.
We create governments to minimize violence from war and crimes by coercing compliance with laws. We give them armies and police forces, and we expect them to coerce compliance with laws to minimize crimes and war. Innovation is a compliance failure. So whenever governments control a sector of the economy, you get a century of rotary telephones, a century of 25 mile per gallon Model T efficiency. You get no innovation because two aspects of liberty intertwine to create the general welfare: tolerance of disruptive minorities offering choices. And there's almost no minority as tiny and disruptive as inventors or, like Martin Luther King, people who are addressing a long-standing social ill. And then tolerance of the wisdom of the many, sorting those choices in free markets and free speech. So brilliant ideas are a dime a dozen. Think about Solyndra. It was a brilliant idea. Wasn't commercially viable, but it was brilliant, okay? Only customers can sort out the difference between what's valuable and what is really cool idea, but doesn't have any application. Like hydrogen's a really cool application. Drones are a really cool application, but they're a 1% niche. They're not going to replace 80% of trips. Are you familiar with Hyperloops?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am.
Okay. Think about how much energy was put into Hyperloops. And I'm a believer in tube networks, but not 700 miles an hour. Make them go 80 miles an hour and put them down the freeway right away so you don't have to get new rights of way, and they'll be a stunning success. 98% of trips are less than 50 miles. 3% are less than 25 miles. So 93% of all efforts should go into 3% of trips. Yet government spending mass amounts of money on high-speed rail and interstate highways and not making ordinary streets walkable and bikeable. And walkable and bikeable, commerce and community are both walkable and bikeable. All right, there's a really, I'll send you a link to it, really good example. 1973, US, Denmark, and Sweden all used exactly the same, well, pretty close to exactly the same, 43 megawatt hours of oil per person per year. After the 73 oil embargo, all of us had at that point in time the same sprawl highway, the car was the answer to everything behavior. Same parking problems, same everything. After the 73 oil embargo, Sweden and Denmark worked to make their streets walkable and bikeable again. U.S. policies continued sprawl. Mm-hmm. The result was they reduced their oil consumption to 60% below the U.S. and their road kills of bike riders and pedestrians 400% below the U.S. Same economic outcome, but a radical difference in cost. All right. Now, there was a lot of resistance to Obamacare, which was federal forcing of buying insurance. But the federal highways forces you to buy a car if you want to be economically competitive. It is exactly the same defect of the federal government centrally planning economics. Instead of bottom up, where we adapt to everybody's wants and needs, it's top down, and you can't, if you want to innovate solar power transportation networks, it doesn't matter because there's no room for such innovation in a central plan. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'll send you a link. I wrote a book on this. It's 56 pages, and anybody that listens to your podcast, I'll give you a link that you can send it to, and they can have a free copy of it.
Amazing.
It's only $12 or something like that on Amazon.
Perfect. Yeah. And I can see you can get right into the heart of issues. I do have some questions to ask if you're okay with me kind of going through a couple of them just to get this kind of broad stroke of you and JPods. I'll do it at the beginning too, to give people this idea that this is solar powered transport network. I definitely would like to circle back to on the rail conversation. But just as you've got this mission with replacing oil-based transportation with solar powered networks, I'm just curious, like what the driving force behind this idea, kind of what inspired JPods for you. You touched on it some, but just to
so it's oil wars. I'm an infantry guy. I look at this thing and say 10 of the last 10 presidents outlined that foreign oil addiction is a direct threat to national security. Since 1990, we've been funding oil dollar funded terrorists. We've been fighting oil war since 1991. Every time you fill up your tank with gas, you're sending some money to Russia to wage war on Ukraine. You're sending money to Iran to have fund terrorists. This whole concept that the federal government should make us buy oil is just fundamentally stupid when you look at that. Then you have to park your damn car. You can't just walk around anymore. When I was a kid, because you weren't, I mean, I could ride bikes everywhere. Grandchildren cannot ride bikes. It's not safe for them. They can't go out on adventures. They can't ride their bikes down to the river and play at the side of the river all day. No, they sit and watch an iPad all day. We really goofed in this whole government planning of highways.
Yeah.
So it's really the network that matters. So, all right, here's another example of this shift. Do you remember the Motorola Razr? You might be too young.
I remember that.
Okay. It was a spectacularly well-designed and engineered cell phone. It was it was a digital device on the analog network. I love my Razr. But when Apple came out with the iPhones in 2007, they wiped out the Razr's market because it was a digital device on the digital network. That's exactly what we're seeing in transportation is you think of Waymo and Tesla, and they're digital cars on the analog highway. JPods are digital vehicles on digital grade separated guideways. So it just 95% of the costs just go away. The problem is you have to get governments to grant access to rights of way for these to be built. So have you seen our 5x5 standard?
I don't think so.
We have a really simple 5x5 standard that sets up so that for governments to allow free markets. It says if you're privately funded, 5 times more efficient than roads, we pay 5% of gross revenues, and we're regulated by the same standards as Disney's monorail or theme parks. And with that, we can come with money, and $10 trillion of these networks will be built over the next 15 years, which sounds like a lot. Okay, that's about 500,000 miles. But in the late 1800s, with basically hand tools, 260,000 miles of railroads were built. So we're just talking about building grade separated items that are as efficient or approach the efficiency of freight railroads. And we're only talking about twice as much as the railroads were at that time. Okay. So it's not something we haven't seen before. Newsweek did an interesting article that 60% of people can't afford their cars. Basically, it costs $92,000 a year or $9,200 a year to own a car. It's parked 95% of the time, and 85 cents of every dollar spent on cars leaves the local economy. So when we make it walkable and bikeable cities, that money can stay in the city, in the community. And instead of importing oil and cars from outside the city, they can set up factories and build these networks themselves inside their city. So now the jobs and the value stay inside the city.
Yeah, that sounds ideal. And I know we're getting into kind of the meat of the conversation, but maybe just to give the high level for people listening, what is a JPod? You know, how, if you were giving them the 30-second description, what is this network that you're looking to implement?
Okay, so think of the problem of sitting on a highway is you're fighting with traffic. So what we do is we grade separate. That removes all the start stops and all the complexities. Then we flip it upside down and we hang 500-pound pod from this that can move 1,200 pounds of payload. And then we deploy solar collectors over the top of the guideways to power the networks. So to give you an idea of how this works, next time you get in an elevator and push the button, you're riding in a vertical JPods. These are no more complicated than a network of horizontal elevators. It's just that simple. It's just Uber on its own freeway run by a robot. And so you just walk up, your phone's talking to it, and your destinations are on it, or you can use your face, or you can use your finger, or you can use a card and tell it where you want to go. And there's a computer in it, and off it goes. And then you just pay just like you would Uber.
Nice.
Does that make sense? Is that a good explanation or a short enough explanation?
It does, yeah, and I'll link to. I've got the videos that you've shared with me before, showing visual representations of what that looks like. Your website I'll share on the bottom of the interview. You've mentioned that the regulatory barriers have been one of the biggest obstacles for JPods. Can you talk about some of the challenges you faced in getting government buy-in?
Yeah, so that congressional study is really good. PB-255-845, automated guideway transit. I'll send you a link to it so you can have it on your links. But it lays out that, so think of bureaucracies are by definition the institutionalized suspension of judgment. They don't make decisions. They look at a checklist. If they don't have a checklist for it, they can't do it. And that's the whole problem of this difference between liberty to innovate and centrally planned bureaucrats is bureaucrats can't do something if they don't have a checklist for it. And so that's why we came up with the 5x5 standard. It's been partially passed in the state of Massachusetts, and their environmental agency is responsible for implementing first projects, but they still are waddling around in their bureaucracy. North Central Texas Coalition of Governments voted that we can start building in Dallas-Fort Worth area, but no city is committed yet. Macon, Georgia, voted or signed the contract, but they haven't taken it to their city council. So this is just, it's each, when you have all of these bureaucracies, everybody can say no and nobody can say yes. And this is what's really important about setting up free markets is let as many innovators as come in. Until we have a problem with a shortage of traffic problems, we should let anybody build anything they can conceive of as long as they agree to fund it themselves, tear it down if they fail, and are responsible for this ASTM F24 is the standard that has a 3,000 times better safety record than roads. So if they comply with that, let people do anything that solves traffic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let the customers sort out which they like better instead of bureaucrats trying to decide which they should do. Because bureaucrats, all right, have you ever seen Milgram experiments?
I'm not sure that I have.
Okay, so after World War II, Milgram was wondering how so many people could tolerate the death camps in Germany. And so they did a study, and 68% of people, if you're sitting in an authority-driven environment, will electrocute another person if they're told to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's just, you look at it, it's horrible. But I'm going to guess that in general, people who can sit in a cubicle for 30 years working there self-select to being in that 68%. Okay. People who are not going to be tolerant of authority will move out of that authority structure. So you have both the personality and you have the nature of the institutions of coercing compliance instead of disrupting their behavior. Innovation is disruptive. You're going to, like I said, two aspects, individuals, two aspects of liberty intertwined to create the general welfare. Innovators offering disruptive choices and people sorting those choices in free markets and free speech. So it is very disruptive. Think about how many jobs Bill Gates and Steve Jobs destroyed and how many jobs were destroyed by Henry Ford, all the buggy whip companies and all the wheel makers and all those businesses went away. It's very disruptive. Now, in general, the value exceeds the cost of disruption or the quality of life increases or all these things, but bureaucrats can't see that. They can only see that you're disrupting their power base.
Yeah. Yeah, the bureaucratic seems like a big obstacle. Do you have any kind of like imagining of how you see innovations like JPods changing how cities function, like what that looks like, both in terms of mobility, energy efficiency?
Yeah, I think you're going to see cities turn into Amsterdam and Copenhagen and you're going to see this radical shift to walking and biking. You're going to see, how you don't have a corner grocery store within probably walking distance of where you live. Now there will be because you can move payloads of logistics as efficiently as Walmart. Now you don't have big box stores because you can have a neighborhood grocery store down at the end of your block that gets groceries delivered constantly whenever they need it. So you're going to see this thing shift from big and centralized where you have to get in your car. You don't know your neighbors because you get in your car to leave your house. You never sit and walk past them and chat. But now when you start to walk, now all of a sudden you get to know your neighbors. Our neighborhoods become much more cohesive. And you can go down and have a beer with your friends. It's going to be kind of fun.
It sounds like a lot of taking the clock back, so to speak, kind of like you spoke to earlier in your life, having that walkable, the adventures, the getting to know people more closely. I noticed
Well,
that.
think about how much you like walking around a theme park or a state fair or a fair. That's what cities will be like when they're walkable, is they will be like theme parks.
I like it. I noticed that JPods, it allows anyone to design networks for their own city. How can local communities get involved in implementing JPods in their own areas?
All right, so we have a STEM program for schools, and we've got software that can be free. It's free to download, And so anybody that, all right, so let's take the Garden Girls in Fremont, California. They designed or they gave a presentation to the Fremont City Council. They'll get shares in the company that owns the network in the East Bay in California. They were in third grade or fifth, they were in sixth grade at the time. All right. This is one of those things where anybody can design this stuff. This is not about credentials. It's about moxie and hard work. So anybody can download the software. If they can design a network that's economically viable that I can take to capital sources and the government there will allow it, they can own some shares in the networks that they design. So we're a bunch of old guys, okay? We have to pass the baton. So I'm not controlling any of this stuff. We're empowering it. So we give out the tools, we give them the software, the tools, and we'll form companies around them that know how to do the engineering. But then high school kids can design networks for their city or even grade school. It's not that we've had 6th to 8th grader or 3rd to 8th graders designing these networks in Massachusetts and in California, and they do a pretty good job of it because they know where they like to go. And I don't know their city.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also we have a program that lets everybody sign on and put where they want stations. And so it creates nodes. So I don't know if you've ever seen how they build sidewalks sometimes by just putting grass everywhere. And then wherever the paths get built, they build the sidewalks.
I have seen that.
Same thing is you just let people tell you what they want and then let them wear the path and then build it to meet their wants.
Yeah, really, really decentralized in that way, decentralizing the intelligence. I'm curious if you have any advice for other entrepreneurs trying to innovate in industries with heavy regulation or entrenched players.
Yeah, find a commercial cluster. So one of the things that's had been a hampering in this industry, which might be called pod cars or PRT or automated guideway transit, is that people think that they're competing with each other and they're not. They have to get the idea that they are an industry that needs a Silicon Valley, a Detroit, a New York for finance, where you get multiple competitors in the same neighborhood. So you can go have coffee, or your engineers can go have coffee, or your sourcing people can go have coffee with each other, and you build a cluster, and all the suppliers want to cluster in there. So create clusters. Detroit, Silicon Valley, New York, they're just one right after another examples of Shenzhen, of why you need to be in clusters.
Yeah,
And stop whining about worrying about market share when it's like I told you, it's about $10 trillion will be built over the next 15 years, which sounds like a bizarre amount of money until you look at it. We're spending $2.76 trillion a year to sit in traffic jams. So if you could build it all at once, you'd have a 5-year payback on a $10 trillion effort. So there's no competitive reason. Worry about the competitors when you've satisfied a third of the market.
nice. Yeah, and that's
what I would tell most competitors, innovators, is go cuddle up with your enemies or your competitors, because they're actually your friends.
wise words. And if I could, and one final kind of question for this, and we can talk more after too, but I'm curious what the next big milestones are for JPods, kind of what you're most excited about.
Okay, building in either Macon, Atoka, Oklahoma. We've got a contract in Baghdad, Iraq, or in Dallas, Fort Worth area. I need to get a guideway certified. That I have. In order to do that, I have to have some city saying, yes, I will give you rights of way. And I will fund that. And then once we get that done, then Department of Energy loan program is actually pretty darn amazing in that we can get probably $400 to $800 million to ramp the supply chains on this in the US. And then once we start at that level and people realize that they can turn their cities into being walkable and bikeable, this thing is going to have a network effect. So the prime law of networks is that the value of a network expands exponentially based upon the number of interconnected nodes. Okay. So when I was at Honeywell in the early 90s, we had teletypes for talking with our suppliers and exchanging notes. In 1980, nobody had fax machines in their offices. In 1981, 2% of people had fax machines, and then 5% got them, and then everybody had to have one immediately. Once the network effect starts to take effect, it will drive everybody into doing this faster than you could imagine. When in 1980, I don't know if you've emails in many companies were forbidden, or 1990. Okay, if you go back to, have you ever seen the Today Show where Allison, what's the internet anyway?
I've not seen that.
Okay, so here's the markers for the internet deploying. 1918, Wilson monopolized it. 1926, Tesla says the world will be one gigantic brain. 1927, first video call. 73, cell phones were available. 68, every aspect of the internet was demonstrated in the mother of all demos. I'll send you a link to that. It's really worth watching, even 4 minutes of it, starting at minute 30. 1982, the courts declared the federal communications monopoly unconstitutional. 83, Frank Caulfield of Kleiner Perkins invested in a little company that became AOL. And then they started spamming everybody with discs constantly. And then You've Got Mail took off. 94, in the Today Show, they're going, Allison, what's the internet anyway? I saw that @ sign. I don't know what that means, that about. And anyway, I'll send you a link to that because it's really cute. But it marks the general population's understanding that the internet was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2007 marks the shift from the analog network to the digital network with Apple's iPhone. And then it just has exploded since. It was exploding since 1990, but only geeks knew about it between 1990 and 1994, pretty much. So that same exponential growth is what you're going to see. And then think about, transportation has always been the catalyst for changing energy systems. So we paddled boats, then we built water wheels. We sailed boats, then we built windmills. We rode horses, then we harnessed them to a plow. In the 1860s, after we chopped down every tree anywhere near anything, railroads shifted from burning wood to burning fossil fuels. And that shifted from biofuels driving everything to fossil fuels. When we deploy these solar collectors over the top of our guideways and power this within a solar budget, everything's going to switch to solar massively. Not everything, but a lot. Solar's just cheap. I mean, Edison was right in 1910. It's just cheap.
Yeah, man, getting cheaper and cheaper.
And it's 10 to 50 times cheaper than oil-based infrastructures. Just that the oil-based infrastructures are government monopolies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the barrier. So we need liberty.
Yeah. Well, I want to continue our conversation here. I think for our episode or recording here, I'd like to say thank you for sharing your insight, and I'm definitely excited to see where JPods goes next. So,
yeah, anybody who wants to get a hold of us, our contact information is at the website. You can post it when you do this. And we want to pass the baton. We want to empower people to achieve things. So we are very open to sharing equity with people who take initiative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think that's really a model for future design and innovation, is to allow it to become decentralized, to allow really anybody to get their hands on it, kids to elders to anybody to be able to really feel involved and to have that network effect like you're talking about, creating those nodes that when they start talking about it to one another, the exponential.
They'll be smarter and cleverer and have more insights than we have. I mean, it's the more people you get thinking, the more creative it becomes. And so if you change economic lifeblood from oil to ingenuity, oil depletes. The more you use ingenuity, the more of it you get.
I like that.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's a nonlinear dependency. It's really cool.
Yeah. I've seen a saying about that. If I have a coin and I give you a coin, now I have one less coin and you have one more. But if I have an idea and I give you an idea, now we both have ideas. And
yeah,
it is.
And not only that we have ideas, but they polish against each other and get better and better and better. That goes back to the cluster thing, is you can have a brilliant idea, but you need to rub it against other brilliant ideas to sort off the rough edges, because brilliant ideas are a dime a dozen, but you need to make them commercially viable, and that takes a cluster or customers. And it's like evolution is not an evolving thing, it's a killing off thing. In other words, we didn't evolve because this was a better idea. We evolved because the people who didn't have our characteristics died out.
Yeah.
It's not without suffering and trials and tribulations, but you can make your own trials and tribulations, or you can avoid trials and tribulations and be mediocre.
Yeah. And I'm curious while we've got time. I've got another appointment in about 15 minutes, but I wanted to check on what you mentioned with the rail system, if that's anything you think that we could actually start implementing or
Rescue rail right now today. Okay. You find somebody in Asheville who's doing cleanups,
yeah.
and let's talk to them and say, we'll just make it so that we can, I'll send you some pictures of temporary setups, but we just come in there and throw up some tripods, put a guideway into a place where there's a lot of debris, pull the debris out to the road.
We have debris in ample supply right now, so
Right. Or if there's a bridge and they can't get across it, you just build a simple guideway across that bridge, and now you can move supplies back and forth across the bridge.
yeah, huge
Temporary bridge. And then you take it down and go away when it's done.
a huge need right now in these areas. There's a lot of roads washed out, a lot of that supply transportation trying to take place, a lot of helicopters going to do that right now.
Yeah, think of how much energy a helicopter takes versus one of these guideways.
Yeah.
These guideways are 10 times, 20 times less energy intense than cars, and helicopters are just oodles times more energy intense than cars.
And do you have, is it like yourself or anybody else who would be a good contact person if I'm able to?
You can contact me, but I'll also send you Cam and Tanya's contact information, and they're right in Asheville.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So this again comes back to clusters, is find a community and it becomes more powerful than individuals. And then I can tap into thousands of ex-military people and say, here, go do this. And they get structure.
Nice.
Yeah, but this is all about, this is really simple. I mean, like I said, my first one of these was a barn cleaner. You know, my grandpa had it. It was a half barrel hung from a rail. It had a little chain that you could lower it down. I'd fill it up with shit and pull it back up and push it out to the manure spreader. And too short to use a wheelbarrow, I could move tons. It's just that simple. Only think about the little vacuum cleaning robots that are running around your house, only on the scale of storm debris. And you do it so it's grade separated. That way you're not fighting all the ground clutter that you have to get over. Yeah, let's do this in Asheville.
Yeah, it's needed. Asheville, and there are many surrounding towns too who also would greatly benefit from having that kind of assistance.
And this is an ongoing, there's always going to be another earthquake. There's always going to be another hurricane. There's always going to be another war. I mean, we need to be able to have things all right, so think of these rescue rail like county Ford roller coasters as opposed to theme park roller coasters. Okay, you just come in, set it up, run it while you need it, take it down and go away.
Yeah.
And you have a good group in Asheville, Urban 3. Are you familiar with them?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, you should put them on your list
I will.
of people you're doing interviews for. They do the best modeling, one of the best. They in strong towns and walkable cities do one of the best assessments of the cost of sprawl. Okay. Now, the problem with Urban 3 and strong towns is they think mass transit, but mass transit is a failure in the US and the failure in the world, because you want to go where you want to go and I want to go where I want to go. And if we both have to get on the same bus, it doesn't go where either one of us wants to go. And they cost 25 to 50 times more than JPods, or 2.5 to 5 times more than riding in a car. So why should I wait around and waste my time on a bus when I can just get in my car and go? Now, when we make it so that you can get in your bike, ride down to the corner, take your bike on a pod, get off your bike and go the last half mile, now you're going to see people on scooters and bikes everywhere. And now we'll actually talk to each other and we won't be fat. And we like it. Have you ever been in New York City and you just walk around because it's kind of cool, or San Francisco? We like walking. We enjoy it. When there's something to see and smell, people to watch, we just really like it.
Yeah,
so that's the nature of community, is make communities instead of get inside an iron box.
Yeah. And currently I got a conversation with a fellow, Now Cities he's designing walkable cities and how to make that more prevalent. And so I'm pretty excited about all these conversations that I'm going to start having and clustering the different people and the expertise and seeing how we might be able to really start collaborating to make that a reality more quickly.
That's what cities should do. That's what city governments should be held accountable to is how, all right, so have you seen the Walkable Index?
I've not.
I'll send you a link to it. People can look at how walkable their city is, but the single thing a city should do is become walkable. And I'll send you a short, well, it's not short, it's 11-minute video on import reducing cities. So I'll send you a list of books too, like Walkable Cities, Cities in the Wealth of Nations, City Limits. I'll send you a list of books that are really good at this. So JPods long term should only be a third of the solution. 60% of the solution should be bikes and walking. But in the beginning, JPods is going to be 60% of the solutions because we got to get cities to be safe enough to walk and bike. And then once they become safe to walk and bike, JPods market share will drop, but our freight carrying in cities will stay high. So it's okay. We don't have to be everything to everybody all the time. We know we're going to lose market share to bikes and walking once we get cities safe enough. But cities aren't safe right now. So we're going to have to pick up extra load in the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you have to.
In a perverted way, it does make sense, but it shouldn't make sense.
Right. But you're scooping out. You're going back to your roots. You're taking out the shit and going to spread it elsewhere.
Which just brings us back to the Asheville and the cleanup is find people that need cleanup and let's go build some of these and we'll just start.
Yeah, absolutely. And more people that see it and understand the concepts, they can start becoming spokespeople or get involved themselves and
make it ordinary.
Yeah,
it is really ordinary. It's really simple. I mean, like there's one with the laser range finders and the cameras, AI cameras, and the Raspberry Pi controllers and the motors. I mean, the technology is just really manageable. And so there's a full-size motor structure. Okay. Now that's on Skyrides, and Skyrides is similar to JPods. I didn't create it. It's created by a friend of mine, Scott Olson. I'll send you a link to Skyride, but he uses my robots. But Skyride is on the Carnival cruise ships now and was rated best cruise ship feature of 2016 and 17. Scott also created rollerblades. So it's just his thing is fitness. Mine's robots. It's a good match.
It is, yeah, a lot of crossover. And would it be, you've given me quite a list of links you're going to be able to send me. Are you tracking those, or would it be helpful if I sent you kind of some of the list I can take or summary from our...
Yeah, send me a list of what you want to show. I'll send you some other lists that you may want to think about.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely open for it. I just want to make sure there were the videos that you'd mentioned about and then how people can get involved setting this up themselves.
I'll help you write that back and forth, and we'll get it cleaned up so it's nice and clean. And say anybody who wants to get involved in this can get involved. I have a Pathfinder agreement that lays out that whenever we form one of these companies, I give people the same number of shares that I personally get. Okay, because I'm going to be dead before long. And I want to get this built before I'm dead. Yeah. I mean, it's just when you get really old, or I'm not really old, but I'm 74. I'm old enough to sit and see when you go to Costco, sometimes wondering if I'm buying this for the last time. So I want this built, and I want it built now.
Well, I appreciate the effort that you're putting into it. And yeah, I really hope that the distributing that you're planning on here, it takes off. And
yeah, we'll make everybody a capitalist. Everybody gets shares. Everybody, the more this gets so that it's an owner-driven world, the better off the world will be.
There's a strong incentivization. That system might end up changing over time, but for the current times, yeah, it is.
And if we're careful, we should be foresightful enough to recognize that having people have a share makes good sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was an infantry guy. If your troops don't feel like that they're part of the decision-making process and that they own the mission, you're fucked. Yeah, the first ripple that happens that's not well planned for, everything turns to a bag of crap. Yeah. No, you need. So von Clausewitz's definition of power is the will and ability to win applied to achieving an objective. So the will to win is your people, their sweat, time, belief, tears. The ability to win is how well you manage resources and focus those resources, and leadership is what gives those directions to who does what, why, when, and where. Okay. And then our definition of excellence is the process of relentlessly improving. So you start by adhering to what you know, then you plan for how you're going to change your organization, you test your assumptions, and then you pull the trigger and you start spiraling in on where you've got to go. Okay. So the hardest thing to do is to start. Once you start, the pain and the pleasure will correct you on target. Does that make sense? Yeah. But if you don't write down and document where you're going, then you're just wandering around and your markers won't make any difference, and the pain and pleasure won't inform you. But if you say, this is where we're going, this is why we do it, you tighten your shot group, now you can move it around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll send you a series of links. You can send me what you think would be good on your site. I have a graphic for that, power and excellence, if you'd like to have it too.
Yeah, please. We'll take the resources, and especially too those contacts for the Asheville area. I would definitely love to get into contact.
I'll send you those right away.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, go ahead, go have a cup of coffee with them. Make it personal.
Will do.
Okay. And anytime you want to talk about any of this stuff, let me know, Timothy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll start getting myself more educated, checking out these resources, and then can have a more.
How did you start this channel? I don't want to run over your time, but
yeah, we'll have to pop off. It really just came from wanting to kind of like you talked about creating those clusters. For me, I can only do so much as an individual, and I really want to see before my time the world improve across multiple different sectors. This is just a way for me to be able to start gathering information to broadcast these resources so that other people can be aware of them and connect with them. So it's just part of my mission.
okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I like it, and you ask good questions.
Yeah, that's, I appreciate it. There's a lot of different ways the conversations can go. So yeah, I appreciate you being part of it and being willing to answer and have this kind of dialogue.
Okay, anytime you want, let me know.
We'll do.
But I know we're coming up on 2 minutes to 3 my time.
Yeah.
But I'll sit and chat with you forever. But on this,
I appreciate it. Yeah, I realized that when we're just starting off, there were a lot of depths that we could have gotten into, especially around how to implement, what some of the past issues have been. So I appreciate you allowing those broad strokes of conversation. And yeah, as I get more educated too, we can follow up with more in-depth conversation.
yeah, the whole thing relative to regulations is you're hunting for a unicorn, a government with an imagination that will allow innovation. It's a rare entity. Now, once it starts and they have a checklist for this, but like the 5x5 standard gives them a checklist, says, okay, I don't have to know the technology. It just has to be 5 times better and they have to pay for it. Now it's easier for them to adopt it because they don't have to think that they have to approve it's just like building plans. They hold people accounting to building standards, but they hold them accountable after the fact. They don't approve the drawings before they build it. They just check to see that it's certified and signed off by appropriately qualified engineers. Does that make sense? Right now, all these transportation departments think that they have to be the expert in it, and they are not the experts in anything. They can be well-meaning, but parking requirements completely suck. Highways kill people at 3,000 times the rate of theme parks. So why do we have standards? Why do we tolerate standards that are that crappy?
Yeah, probably mostly that bureaucracy and just the slow-moving engine that is the.
And they have no sovereign immunity. So you can sue a theme park. You can't sue the government agents that built your road that killed your kid on a bicycle.
Wow.
Yeah, sovereign immunity is a bad idea. I mean, it's good for some things, but not for most things. There needs to be much more accountability. Wow. And we wouldn't do stupid shit. But when you're not accountable, we can be pretty dumb. Even me, I look back on things and I go,
made it out. All right, Bill, I gotta jump off to my next call, but I really appreciate the time we've spent here and look forward to checking those resources and follow-up conversations.
And I'll send you Cam and Tanya's stuff. Thanks, Timothy.
Absolutely. Thank you.